Hi, I'm Alicia Parr, the CEO and founder of Performentor, and I'm here with Olalah Njenga. She's the CEO of Yellowwood Group, and we're here to talk on leader-to-leader topics. And today we're talking about what does it mean to be a boss? What do you think, Olalah?
I think the word boss is getting a bad rap.
It's used in a lot of strange ways that I never anticipated. Like you see boss girl, boss lady, and it's so funny is like, why would we have to clarify boss with some other adjective?
I don't know, and I'm not going to take that one on. I do think it's interesting though how people use the word boss like a verb almost, like well, you're like okay, as if somehow like the being the boss is like this hugely negative, like oppressive thing. And then there's like the rescue version, which is like, I don't know, I'm going to ask my boss. And so I think it's interesting how that word gets used. But at the end of the day, I think what people are really referring to is whether or not I see and regard and respect this person as someone who leads me sometimes and manages me other times. And I think that is worth having.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Leading and managing, you can get 1,000 definitions of each thing.
Right.
Of course, we each have our own.
Right.
Probably they're sharing kind of how each of us think about this. When you
Right.
think about the distinction between those two, how do you think about it?
So I go back to kind of the fundamentals of management, which
Yeah.
is leading is inspiring others to do the work.
Uh-huh.
Managing is getting others to do the work.
Okay.
The others are, whether it's contractors, employees, it can be vendors, it can be, a whole hodgepodge.
Yeah.
What I think is interesting though is this relationship between inspiring and getting,
Uh-huh.
right? And so what can be tricky is when you are one and the same. So like in my firm, I'm both the leader and the manager.
Uh-huh.
And knowing when to shift between those two roles, when I need to inspire my team versus when I need to actually encourage them and oversee the work that they're doing so that the work gets done. We have contractual commitments, the work has to get out the door. And so I think in a small team, when that line is blurry, it can create some confusion sometimes about when you're leading and when you're managing. And I know I have been in that scenario with an employee because of my leadership style. It's very peer driven. And it created a lot of confusion for one of my employees who didn't know how to take me because she said, I don't know what to do because you're my boss. But on this project, I'm your teammate. And she just really couldn't. She was like, till.
Yeah.
She was
Well,
in
like
full
there's the
meltdown.
person, right? And you
Right.
have a title, right? And a
Right.
role, but then there's the role that you're playing in that particular situation. And what you're
Yeah.
saying is, I'm your peer right here. I'm not your
Right.
boss.
Right. It's tricky. And I'm not alone.
Yeah.
I think it's trickier when it's a woman leader, right?
Mm-hmm.
The quintessential boss lady.
Oh,
So when
yeah.
it's a woman leader managing a woman team member, it seems to me like the instances of confusion or murkiness is higher than when the leader slash manager is male.
Uh-huh.
So I just think that's an interesting dynamic that I see less of that with some of my male colleagues and
Yeah.
more of it with more of my female colleagues who own their businesses. What's been your experience?
Yeah, I mean, definitely being a female comes with its own benefits and difficulties in doing any particular kind of thing. And,
Right.
so, in the case of what we're talking about, leadership or maybe older ways of thinking about leadership and management, those aren't always consistent with other expectations
Mm,
of what it means to be good at being a woman.
right.
So yeah, because we often have many roles, not all of us, but
Right.
many of us are also mothers, and that comes with its own set of expectations,
Right.
and influences, sometimes chemical in our bodies, and some of them social. So
Yeah.
it does make a big difference. And I think one of the things that I find really striking in terms of kind of old ways of thinking about management and newer ways is management is accountability for the performance of collective
Right.
performance of a group of people.
Right.
And that, in order to do that, I guess you could have the assumption that you need to boss them around or
Right.
tell them what to do. But
Right.
that's actually not what works.
Right. Right. And unfortunately, we still do have managers, part of our labor force, who subscribe to that perspective. And they're missing opportunities to let people really shine,
Yeah.
to allow people to bring their whole self and their best self to the role that they're in and the work that they do. And so there's a tension. I refer to it as a gentle tension in the labor force between managerial expectations and team member output, productivity, and camaraderie. And so that blend is made for a more complicated labor force, like just, kind of in the macro, like across the country. But it's also made for some pieces of contention, because when you are in a multi-generational team environment, you have different expectations about what the role of the boss is supposed to be. And so that can get kind of tricky when you've got, 20 somethings, 30 somethings, 40 somethings, and 50 somethings, which is the case in my company. And they have different expectations of how they view me and what they're expecting from me, how much guidance, how much direction, how much input, how much recognition, how much feedback. It's just like, whoop, whoop, whoop. It just keeps going.
Yeah. It's, and a lot of that stuff sounds, maybe it's not practical because it sounds, again, woo woo,
Right.
very practical. If people,
Yeah.
if we have people in roles, don't we want them to feel as, I don't know, motivated and incentivized and excited or in the right seats to do the things? And how can that go optimally well if you think that your job is to tell people what to do rather than to unleash them to do the things that they're capable of doing?
Right. I love that. Can we talk about your unleash people energy and the thought behind that as it directly relates to what it means to be a boss? Because not only is that brilliant, but the reframing of how we show up as leaders and / managers, what that means to be the boss, how we are helping our team members bring out their best individual selves under this framing of unleashing people energy to propel growth. When I was first introduced to that, I was just blown away because I thought, I need to know what that is and I need more of it. Whatever that is, I need more of that.
That's the thing, people, those are two words that we are all very familiar with, people and energy. And we all often say the energy in the room, I feel energized, I feel de-energized. I can, what's the energy in this situation? Like if we just put our ear to the ground and pay attention, it's very common. And I would say we all know exactly what people energy is. And and having more of it harnessed in the right direction is good, because if you think, when we look at a business, is to think about it, we are people's energy into economic value, and we're doing it in a manner where we can sustainably do that. And so if we look at a business with that lens, then we realize that in order to grow the way we want, we need to think about getting people into the right seats so they're unleashed, in resources so they're unleashed, make sure the operation structures are in place and the purpose is clear so that they're harnessed. And that's how you go about it. And when you look at a business that way, it becomes evident, obvious that that top-down control, command and control, that can't be the best way to go. It's a way.
It's a way, right? It's a way. Well, I love the way that you frame that definition of business, the conversion of people energy into economic value. Not only is it a much more positive reframe, but it's a much more inclusive way of allowing leaders and managers or bosses to have the conversation with their team members to say, you matter. Your contribution matters. We can't do it without you and without your contribution. So how can I help you win? How can I help you unleash the best parts of you so that you feel whole, you feel recognized, you feel valued, you feel heard, you feel respected. And, people can say what they want. They can call it soft or woo or whatever they want to call it. But I will tell you, we know that people don't leave jobs, they leave managers, right? And we know that workers are much more sensitive to, well, what is leadership saying that we value as a company? What are we saying are those, kind of normative behaviors that make this company what it is? And to the modern workforce is much more sensitive to how they're being treated as a person first than as a worker. And that distinction, I think, is lost on some bosses, per se, that really still do subscribe to that industrial age thinking that people are just units of production. You're here to get the work done. You don't have to like your job. Well, but you do have to like the person you report to. You may not like all aspects of your job, but I can tell you, people forget, I was an employee before I was an employer. You do have to like the person that you report to, because you will get guidance, steering, feedback, insight, whatever from them.
Yeah.
And if there's not some healthy respect there and some genuine likability, as an employee, you're just going to shut down. You're not going to want to listen to anything that person is saying. And then you become disengaged and disinterested.
Because you sort of, you're not going to use your positive people energy as much. If you're like, I put up with this person that I work with, and I'm just here to collect a paycheck.
Right.
And, so those are real feelings that people have. And I would argue probably many are justified. But the more, and nobody can guarantee that everyone's work is 100% all beautiful and sunshine and rainbows.
Right.
But the larger proportion that is stretching, so it's not comfort.
Right. Absolutely.
But stretching. And so that kind of brings me around to leader and how I define it, because I look at it, from leading as a verb.
Okay.
And so a leader has to therefore be defined by the presence of followers. And for me, that's a reminder that leadership is something that can point people in a lot of different directions.
Okay.
And I've seen a lot of softness or lack of clarity in how leadership is used. Because, so for example, one time I gave that definition, and I had some respected friends, who were sharing a story about their daughter who was trying to convince them to do more recycling. And they resisted it for a while, but she made the moral case, and she removed the barriers to getting it done. And finally, over the course of, I think, many, many months, she convinced them to start doing it. And they were wanting to say that, that she's a leader and that they're real proud of her. But when I said, well, leadership is defined by the presence of followers, they're like, oh, does that mean you're saying that my daughter wasn't a leader until we started to follow her? And I was,
interesting.
And I was like, yes.
Yeah.
And why are you so angry?
That got a little prickly. Okay.
Yeah. And so, so sometimes when we say the word leader, we mean that this is something that's really good and moral and upright. And it's better to be a leader than it is to be a manager. And I would say,
wow,
maybe not.
Yeah, I can see how, so I live in a space where there can be more than one truth at a time, right? And so all things being true and equal, similarly to you, I say, be a leader worth following.
Yeah.
And so I think what has happened with kind of our loose translation of how we want to spin things in a positive way is that when people say, oh, that person's a great leader, if there's no one following that person, then by definition, that person is not necessarily leading. So there's the verb for you. They're not leading, but what we're saying is that person, kind of personifies leadership by having these particular attributes. And so what can be tricky, I think, is if you are managing a person who's been told, you're a great leader, you're a great leader, you're a great leader, but that person doesn't have any ID cap, right? Any influence, decision making, control, authority, or power, then that person is bringing that energy and now feels like they're a peer
Mm-hmm.
because they're being told, well, you are a leader. And so now they're trying to put themselves kind of on par with their actual leader in the workplace. And I've seen that dynamic happen. In fact, I'm working with two different clients who are working through, a situation where they let that behavior go for too long. And now there's some challenge that is showing up, right? So we do kind of throw around the word leader in a way that's very interesting. We've made it very broad, and dare I say, we kind of bastardized the potency of the word. But oddly enough, we don't throw around the word manager the way we throw around the word leader.
No, but remember back to our topic, boss. So I think a lot of times we want to take the word manager and affix all of what we see as negative attributes of being a boss to manager. And it's just, I guess it's just, trying to make they're two ideas that in order to have and grow a really successful business or organization, leadership and management are both critical pieces of this. But what can happen is that, there ends up being this distinction of one is a good thing and the other is a bad thing.
Exactly. Like that good cop, bad cop thing, right?
We gotta get past that. Because if we're saying that we can lead people with inspirational words, but not have managerial structures to support it, that somehow can work, and it doesn't.
It doesn't.
Anyway.
It doesn't. You can be inspired to do the work, but the work still has to get done.
Yeah. But so you got to have enough of the economic value and people energy to feed back into it so that it can continue. So
that's the conversion, and that's why I love your definition of what is a business, because it's the conversion, and there's the verb, there's the action, there's the mobilization. All that yummy, delicious stuff is fantastic. Now let's convert that into something else that's yummy and delicious. And that's what we have to remember. And so I would say, like, I need that on a coffee mug. Like, people energy is the conversion of, I'm sorry, business is the conversion of people energy into economic value. I think we need coffee mugs and bumper stickers and t-shirts, because the conversion is the sweet spot of leading and managing. And when you're the one person in your company, especially if it's a small company or small nonprofit, when you're doing both and you're doing that switching, being cognizant that you're doing that switching is super important, because at the end of the day, the conversion is what we are ultimately accountable to. And so I just love the way you have reframed that.
Yeah, I mean, it is a almost sneakily powerful reframe because it really shapes what being a boss needs to mean in a way that I think is much better for all of us.
Absolutely. I think you need to come up with, you are the perfect person. You are such a disruptive force in HRM, disruptive in a very positive way. I think you should come up with a new, like an acronym for BOSS, where you can take those principles and we as leaders can use that acronym, and it gets a completely different new spin on what it means to be a boss. I'm just throwing it out there for you, Alicia. If anyone can do that, it's
okay. Well, I'm open to ideas, and so let's rethink what a boss means in a world where a business is unleashing people energy to propel growth. So
that's right. Love it.
Thanks, Olalah.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Take care.